All right, let's get our Facebook folks in here before it is time to start the show. We got spinning wheels. Oh, one of those was quick. Boom. There we go. Boom, boom. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. It is Thursday morning, the 5th, and it's time for an episode of Broncos for Breakfast. I am Nick Kendell and joined by, as always, for these morning shows, Scott Kennedy. Scott, how you doing? What's good? What's new? What's happening?
I'm doing well. It seems like right after you and I got off potting yesterday, the big news hit, and this was our surprise phase. We weren't surprised. Nick, I text you during this game as I was listening. I was like, is Randy Gregory out when they were playing the Dolphins? Because I was out. I couldn't watch the game
Mhm.
live. I was listening to it on the radio, and I'm watching the box scores. I was like, is he out, Nick? I'm like, no, he's out there. Oh, okay. And then that night I did the pod, that Sunday night, I did the pod with Zach. I'm like, this dude's a ghost. He's checked out. He's gone.
Mhm.
About 9 days later, as you alluded to all last week, he's probably gone. He's could be just a straight out cut candidate. And we call that addition by subtraction, Nick.
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising, and you have to wonder what's going on there. The language that was used yesterday, talking about it being like mutual from a lot of people covering the team, and Sean Payton saying the release is not official quite yet because the Broncos are still hoping for a trade on that. Maybe if a trade does happen, Broncos are probably Broncos will be eating a lot of that money, and it's probably something like the Albert Okwuegbunam trade where you're trading like a 2025 7 and Randy Gregory to get a 2025 6. I'm guessing you're getting very little for that in the end, but I'm guessing it's going to be an outright release given the contract stuff. It's harder to trade that's tied to the contract than it was Albert Okwuegbunam with 1 year of a 4th round rookie contract.
You've got lots of options though. I mean,
Hmm.
as a buyer, it's a buyer's market for Randy Gregory. You're getting rid of
Hmm.
him. I'll send you $1 million. I'll send you a million. You can use that against, to roll over next year in your cap. So the good news is we've talked about him basically since week one, saying he's not going to be on this team next year. And what does that mean? It means you get 10 million back in savings because it was like a 16-6 cap versus dead cap. So most of that money, like, oh, do we get that money back? Well, kind of, but it's almost like he was on the team not producing anyway. So you're still responsible for his 2023 guaranteed money, which you were going to anyway. And it's not like you're going to go out there and take, okay, someone picks up his entire contract. We've got $12 million to spend. Let's go shopping. No, it's the middle of the season. It's too late for
Yeah.
that. All you're hoping at this point is maybe I can swap some insignificant picks. Somebody picks up $1 million, $2 million off of his salary, and then I can allocate that towards my salary cap next year.
Hmm.
That's best case scenario for the Denver Broncos right now with regards to Randy Gregory. Best case scenario for the Denver Broncos right now is just light some fire under some asses. And like we said, addition by subtraction.
Yeah, and we kind of had been alluding to it. I didn't want to like outright, make any unsubstantiated claims, but watching his tape and knowing the talent that he has, you had to question what was going on in terms of the effort and the desire to be out there. I mean, he when he was having his best years in Dallas, he was in a team surrounded by players, and when he was asked to be the guy on a less talented defense, it just wasn't getting it done. I mean, he was just getting blocked and held up, and it didn't look like he was playing to his ability. I mean, there's one thing where you see a guy out there and it's like, okay, he just doesn't have, the tools, the traits. He shouldn't probably be out there. God bless him for maximizing his ability. We've seen the splash plays and the possibility from Gregory. We know it's capable. Granted, most of it came prior to his injury last year, but it was still there, and we are not seeing that this season. So far be it for me to, question too much of the effort stuff out there without, more evidence here. But this to me, now we have a release out here on this before the season's even done. This does seem like the Broncos also were not pleased with the production and effort that they were getting from Randy Gregory this season. And again, I think it's probably inevitable he is cut. It'd be great if they got anything back
Mhm.
for him, but I would be pretty surprised.
Yeah, there's really, as far as financially speaking, there's really not that big a difference if you cut him now or you wait until the offseason, other than what you could get from Randy Gregory this year. And there's some people out there that'll think Randy Gregory's great. He's in the wrong scheme, blah, blah, blah. Man, the guy could not get off the block for anything.
Mhm.
The plays that he makes are when he's engaged, fully effort plays using his athleticism on secondary plays, coverage, backside type of plays, but he's not cutting inside, overpowering a guard, bull rushing somebody, swimming, engaged, getting off blocks like a true edge is. He's a great athlete, and he can make some plays, but there's a reason why his career high in sacks is 6. Because one, he has trouble staying on the field, red flag, and two, he has real trouble getting off blocks, double red flag.
Yeah, I'm actually not positive about one thing you said about the benefit of moving on from him. I think because you choose to move on from him now rather than in the offseason, you can take some of that dead cap, much more of that dead cap this season.
This year, okay.
Yeah, this year rather than splitting it all next year or doing a post June 1st over 2024 and 2025. But I think that because of moving on from him now, they are able to free up a lot of cap space immediately. So I got, Spot Rack here. Shout out to them on Twitter.
For next year. So they wouldn't necessarily, they could take the entire dead cap hit right now and then have that $6 million back off of it next year. That's
They free some. It's technically a post June 1st cut because it is post June 1st. Even though that's a long time ago, it's in the mid-season. But how it sets up is the release will leave behind 16.1 million dead cap this season. So you're already paying him a lot of money this year. So there's not a lot of change for this year, but you are only now on the hook for 6.3 dead million next season. So you're getting a lot of it out of the way. Yep. Yeah. So it's split that way with a post June 1st. So you're eating a lot this year.
Yeah. That's what I said. You're eating the rest of his guaranteed salary for this year, because next year it was scheduled to be a $10 million savings, like $16 million against $6 million. What I thought you were going to say is you could take that $6 million, allocate it 3 of it this year, and then have it only 3 next year. But the 6 was standard for next year.
Yep. So you free up specifically 9.8 next year. So yeah, we're same page. Misunderstood, but wanted to get into the specifics here, and pretty crazy to see this move happening from the Broncos. So we'll get into it more here. We do want to say hello to some people in the chat as you guys are trickling. Make sure you guys click the thumbs up on the way in as well. We really do appreciate that, and like and subscribe, of course. We got Kevin coming in rocking the old school Broncos logo here on his YouTube account. Says, is Benito the same kind of player as Gregory? Benito is not nearly as big or long as Gregory. He's much more of this would just be, I think he's more talented than this, or he has more twitch than this, but the same kind of player as Shane Ray, Broncos country, where he's like, a very twitched up outside speed rusher, where he maybe has the potential to be a full-time starter, a good starter, but for sure, he's going to be a good third down sub package rusher on the outside.
And 2 points on this one, because how I just described Randy Gregory is why Kevin might say this. Well, Benito doesn't overpower guys. He has trouble getting off blocks, but Benito's quicker. So, and the other part of this is you didn't pay $28 million across 2 years for Benito. The cost benefits of a 60 overall pick, Benito is well worth his money. He's earning it. And right now, the effort and attitude are light years apart. So that's the difference. But as far as that's the problem, Kevin, right now is Randy Gregory is playing like Benito without Benito's quickness. Now, if he was able to bull rush guys, and Randy Gregory should be able to hold an edge better, but he wasn't necessarily doing that. So he was playing like Benito's physical skill set, except he should be much more physically dominating because he doesn't have Benito's quickness. They're 2 different players playing a similar style. That's the problem.
And the comparison that I used coming out for Benito was Bruce Irvin. A little bit of a tweener body type, probably could do at Oklahoma. They used him as a stack linebacker a lot, not necessarily lined up at edge. And because of his deficiencies in size and strength, he'll always have limitations in the run game and the power attack, but his bend and his burst and his just overall acceleration, the ability to get to A to B is going to make him a valuable player. Is he ever going to be a plus starter? I don't know, because I don't know if he's ever going to be able to have the strength, and he's just not going to get bigger. He's not going to look out there like a Nick Bosa or a Myles Garrett or a Micah Parsons, guys who are just so much stronger than him. But he can be a plus player on a front, and he brings the most valuable skill set to a front, which is the pass rush ability. So he just needs to be competent and okay against the run, and I think he's at least putting in the work to get there. We'll see if he ever does truly get there, but he's putting in the work to get to that point.
Yeah, and if he becomes a specialist who gets a sack a game and finishes with 15 to 17 sacks, great.
And it's a rotational position, right? Like you
Yeah,
want to have
great.
waves of guys out
Mhm.
there, and he can be definitely a part of that. That's more pass rush oriented. Michael Ronquillo coming in saying good morning. Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos. Good to see you, Michael. Hope you're doing well. Appreciate you always coming in, and always appreciate the post show kind words as well. Shout out to you, Michael. Also, Troy coming in with the 9.99 says, "Hey guys, Gregory seems like a culture move. If Jewell and Simmons play this week, that should help greatly. Hope that is enough to stop the Jets. Then we get more back for the Chiefs. Have a great show." Thank you so much, Troy. Yeah, the Purcell, Jewell, and Simmons spine of the defense coming back against the Jets, who will probably try to run the absolute hell out of the football this week, should be, in theory, big. Granted, the defense wasn't playing great when all those guys were out there for the first 2 weeks, but hopefully it'll be better this week against a Jets team that apparently Breece Hall has no snap count now and also has Dalvin Cook and is probably going to try to limit the amount of true dropback sets from quarterback Zach Wilson.
Who is the most important of those three you mentioned for this defense?
It's probably Simmons, just because I think the overall alignment and stuff and the biggest difference maker, it probably goes Simmons, Jewell, Purcell.
I thought that too, and I went Simmons first just because it's like, well, they're going to try and run the ball. Wouldn't you want Purcell or Jewell? Maybe, but Zach Wilson still threw the ball 40 times against the Chiefs. He's still going to throw it 25 plus times. I want Simmons out there. I want Simmons out there to take one of those. I'll give up the rushing if I can get an interception if Zach Wilson turns into the Zach Wilson we've come to know and love over the last 3 years. And you should get 2 or 3 takeaways here. He played great against the Chiefs, but you can take advantage of Zach Wilson, his tendency to give the ball to the other team.
Yeah. Got Jeremy coming in saying, "Morning, boys." So unlike Austin Powers, Sean Payton wasn't feeling Randy. I see Scott come in and boo that one. Appreciate enjoy that. Justin May, in your guys' opinion, who's been the worst free agent signing, the GM or coach? Signings, the GM or coach? I understand Sean's and his signings have only been here a few months, but golly, they're bad as some of the GMs. I mean, Randy Gregory's is probably the worst signing so far. I mean, we got like 8 games from him, 10 games, 10.
Mhm.
I mean, for 5 years, 70 million. Now, granted, the contract structure is really a 2-year with 3 options, but still, that's pretty bad. But on his heels right now is Mike McGlinchey. He's not looked good at all, and you are in a weird situation with how bad he's playing and the contract that he has. Hopefully, he'll get better out there, but he's not been good through the first 4 weeks, and you are financially tied to him. It's going to be a real weird situation. Let's say the Broncos are picking 4th or 5th overall, and the obvious best players on the board are offensive tackles. Garrett Bowles is playing well. You're committed to McGlinchey. Are you bypassing the obvious best tackles? I mean, are you playing a guy at guard there? I don't know maybe you trade down a couple spots and take Dallas Turner. It's going to be a weird spot if the Broncos are picking 4 or 5.
You approach Garrett Bowles with a contract restructure to save some money, and if he doesn't want it, you move on. He's getting older,
Yeah.
and you replace him with your first-round pick that I can have there for the next decade.
It's weird because since you're picking 4 or 5, there's no guarantee that that's how, like, let's say for some reason Marvin Harrison Jr. falls there, then you're out of left tackle. Maybe it's a post-draft
No, but if you've
trade.
got options, you're saying,
Yeah.
to do those things, you figure out you'll have options there. If you're picking that high, you'll have some good options. That's
Yeah.
fine. And
I
the
think
other good part of this is you have options next year with Garrett Bowles' contract. If
Yeah.
he's earning 18, great. Let him play on 18. If he's not, you can save, what was it? I think it's like 18 and 3. You can save 15 million by doing some other things next year. So we've said before, I don't think there's any way he plays on that contract next year. I still believe that one way or another, whether it's restructured, trade, release, et cetera, et cetera. I still believe that. And Justin, I'm with Nick on this right now. The 2 big candidates are Randy Gregory, who we have a season and change to say, okay, $28 million for 10 games. That's bad. It'll be about $38 million across 2 seasons for McGlinchey before you've got some flexibility there to make a move in year 3. However, there were more red flags surrounding the Randy Gregory signing than there were the Mike McGlinchey signing. So when you're making that signing, it wasn't financially, it wasn't a huge risk. It really wasn't. $12 million is, what, 5% of a
Cap.
5% of a total salary cap for who could be a huge edge, but it was still a bust, and he was high risk.
Yeah.
He was high risk. You didn't have that similar feeling with McGlinchey, and I think McGlinchey, you'll get more out of him. But those are the two big ones.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, we were rightfully so, I believe, pretty tough and critical of Bowles entering this season, given what his contract was like and what he looked like early on. But I think he's been pretty damn good the first 4 weeks this season. So a good problem for the Broncos there. And we'll continue to monitor that because he has a contract that is one, like we talked about, like you just said, probably not playing on that one next year, but maybe crazy things happen. He's playing pretty good football right now, and happy to see that for Garrett. With first, no fear coming in, saying good morning. Good morning to you. 2 questions. What positions are the easiest and hardest to find elite talent at? And do the Broncos have a number 1 wide receiver or 3 number 2 wide receivers? Hardest to find elite talent at. I mean, okay, so this comes down to elite versus like value. Like, how many truly elite stack linebackers are there, Scott? Like true, like second level of the defense guys, not Micah Parsons, who's an edge. It's
Yeah,
like stack linebacker.
and safety, because if they're
Yeah.
truly elite players, they get moved because it becomes
Mhm.
a value thing.
Yes.
I always said that about tight ends. It's changed. The joke I always used was, why don't you find any tight ends in the South? When we were doing recruiting, they're all from the Northeast. They were from out West, because if you were big and fast, you played defense.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't play tight end. You played defensive end.
Edge. Yeah.
From a purely numbers standpoint, going into college football recruiting, I always said the hardest ones to find were qualified defensive tackles. I could go down into Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama and Georgia and find a bunch of really talented 300-pound guys that could move, couldn't get into school. That was just, we're talking 48, 49, and 50 across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia in SAT and ACT scores. The hardest to evaluate for the long term might be the interior offensive linemen, because they're so homogenous.
Mm-hmm.
There are a zillion, and I'm exaggerating, but relatively speaking, compared to a Myles Garrett edge or a Julio Jones wide receiver,
Unicorns.
there's a zillion 6'3", 310-pound guys out there, even in 11th grade. So that's the hardest one. That's why when we look across, the rosters, and when those guys are coming on at Monday Night Football, it said, hey, I'm Scott Kennedy, University of West Texas, Georgia State. They're interior linemen. Those are the guys that come from the smaller schools that you really don't know that much about. When they go to the skill guys, they say Nick Kendell, LSU. Branford Jones, Georgia. Then you get to the interior lineman, you're like Akron. So the hardest ones for the long term to find, to separate those guys out, really is interior linemen.
Yeah. Just for the numbers' sake, I mean, is there a truly an Ed Reed elite caliber safety in the league right now? I don't think so. I mean, Bates is great, Simmons is good, Minkah Fitzpatrick is great, but I don't know if there is like a truly like elite kind of guy at that spot. And linebacker right now, the only one that I'd put in the category of truly elite is Fred Warner. So those are ones just from a numbers perspective, I would say. Easiest to find elite talent at, probably. There's a lot of elite number 1 wide receivers. Now, granted, you need that guy, but if you can, but that's one that stands out to me. And probably, maybe it's edge rushers next, just because they're probably like 6'7", but like the different levels of elite, right?
Yeah, when we're talking about different things, when we're talking about the easiest ones to identify, it's the guys that are the farthest away from the ball, because those are the ones that have the sheerest amount of athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to easiest ones to actually acquire, it's the guys farthest away from the ball, because they have the most athleticism and they have the most unique skill sets. The offensive tackles, there's just not nearly as many guys that are 6'6", 330-pound dancing bears out there as there are guys that are 6'3", 300 pounds. So being able to identify and acquire are two different things. Right now, Nick, I swear to God, it feels like the hardest thing to acquire is an elite pass rusher. An absolutely elite pass rusher, I feel like, is the most rare of all of them in football right now.
Got to have that guy too. I mean, it makes all the difference on a defense. And the Broncos had 2 pretty good ones there for a bit, and that's when their defense was amazing. Gary Palmer 999 says, "Good morning, Nick and Scott. I didn't like Gregory, so I have no problem with him gone. Sorry, George. Go Broncos." Yeah, big indictment on George Payton. We'll get around to that. The other part about with the first no fear, do the Broncos have wide receiver 1 or 2, 3 wide receiver 2s? They might have, only 2 wide receiver 2s and a wide receiver 3, or I think you're closer to each of your wide receivers right now from what we've seen being closer to wide receiver 3s than they are true wide receiver 1s. So I don't think they have a wide receiver 1 and probably, 2.5 wide receiver 2s.
I think Marvin Mims can be a hugely effective, dynamic, big play wide receiver. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the guy that I can count on throwing it to 12 to 15 times when I absolutely need a 3rd and 9.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a number one is who's the guy I know I'm going to try and get the ball to when it matters, and you can't stop him. You can't stop me from getting him the ball. Yeah. Speaking of rare guys, there's not a ton of those guys either.
Yeah.
But that to me is a true number one wide receiver. And Marvin Mims can be, think about all the Batman and Robin combinations out there. And if he was, if he was the skill set of a true number one, you wouldn't have been able to get him in the second round. But that doesn't mean he can't be incredibly effective. That doesn't mean he can't be the best wide receiver on this team. But there isn't a true number one for me right now. I think Courtland Sutton was trending that way before he hurt his knee. And it hasn't come back for him that way. Jeudy, I don't know if it's the spotlight or whatnot, but he talks the talk, but he feels like he's better as a third guy in that Alabama group of number ones, where I can kind of fly under the radar a little bit, as opposed I wilt under the spotlight a little bit. The pressure, just the mentality I see. And Nick, you can go ahead and talk about Jeudy. You called your shot on Randy Gregory. Is Jeudy the next guy out of here?
I think if the Broncos lose to the Jets, I think Judy's going to be shipped out. I think that the way the offense is functioning, it seems like Sutton is a more useful piece. And also, Sutton's a harder to trade player because he's older, the contract, and Jeudy still has that first round pedigree and an easier move to make. So I think if the Broncos lose to the Jets, I have a feeling Jeudy will be gone. I wouldn't be surprised if Jeudy or Sutton were moved, but I don't know. Right now, it feels like more likely it's going to be Jeudy in that regard, but we'll see. Crazy things happen. Maybe the Broncos win. I don't know. I have a feeling about Jeudy, and there's been plenty of rumors about Jeudy and Sutton, not just dating. I mean, we heard it in the offseason, but it's picked up again. Malcolm Brown coming in, say hello from Homer, Alaska. Good to see you, Malcolm.
We haven't seen you in a little while, Malcolm. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, always appreciate you. We got Toyin coming in from across the pond saying good afternoon. Good morning, Broncos country, both of you. We got Philip coming in here. Good morning, everybody. Dave Glassman's in the house with the hearts. Good to see you, Bama X. Good to see you. Jasmine, also haven't seen Jasmine in a bit, says, morning, Nick and Scott. Hope you're doing well, Jasmine. Always appreciate you coming in. Albert Nopper says, good morning to you guys. I'm guessing this is Benjamin Flores, Facebook user, coming in saying, statement cut. Payton takes control. Yeah, this is an easier move to make for Sean Payton and the Broncos because it wasn't Sean who made that signing. It was George Payton who made that signing. So we've been talking about it. We talked about it, for 6 months now, but the negative tallies keep adding up for George Payton. It would be pretty surprising if he was back at this point next year. That said, the Russell Wilson deal is looking a little better right now. He's playing better, but yeah, I mean, that Sean Payton's going to get more credit for that than George is. So, I mean, is this another, horrible tally against George Payton? What do you think this means for him? Doesn't matter.
They're all hired to be fired. They're all basically going to get fired eventually anyway. Mm-hmm. So saying, okay, he's going to get fired isn't really going on a limb. He's a dead man walking.
Mm-hmm. Bring out your dead.
If he is the general manager on this team September 1st of 2024, I will be absolutely shocked. Mm-hmm. Shocked. I don't have a date for it. I don't know if it's pre-draft, end of the season. You'd think Black Monday might be right in that neighborhood, Nick, where they're making a change. But George Payton's a dead man walking, and that's not. It's hard. They're much slower to fire general managers, so I might not necessarily say that if there hadn't been a coaching change. But Sean Payton, he ain't going anywhere, and he's in charge. Mm-hmm. He's going to want his own guy in there. And George Payton has enough black marks on his resume as a Denver Broncos general manager to warrant a change, regardless of the fact that he has a new boss.
Yeah. I mean, he has 2 new bosses, right? Because he
Right,
was hired prior to the Walton Penner Group coming in.
right.
So, uh, fair or not, I mean, George Payton's done some good things, but, this Randy Gregory one is, looking pretty poor, and, the lack of talent, on defense and just overall and the depth issues and most of the signings will fall on George Payton. We'll see about the, Zach Allen and Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey, because I don't think those should be put on George Payton's plate as much as Sean Payton. But he's the general manager, and he was one that was hired prior to Sean Payton. He's not Sean Payton's guy. So the name, again, I brought it up before. Jeff Ireland is probably the name that I think would be the odds leader in that situation, but we'll see. Dom Harmio says, good morning, Nick and Scott. Let's go Dodgers, going to play the D-backs for the NLDS. Yeah, I know that I'm pulling for Scott's Braves. I guess actually I'm probably pulling for Tampa Bay because I saw that they have like no fans there, and I feel bad for them. So let's go Rays. But
I'm so jaded about playoffs after growing up in the 90s and 2000s. Basically, the way I try and put playoffs is the MLB does the single worst job of crowning the best team because they play 162 games. 160, 102 and 60 is a phenomenal record in baseball. Okay. So I don't think anybody's going to really argue the Braves are the best team right now, but the difference between 4 games across 162 games is minuscule. It's basically, in football terms, 10-6 versus 10-6. Well, that's a 50-50 chance. Your odds of winning 3 straight series with a 50-50 chance is 1-8.
mm-hmm.
So why did the Braves only win 1 World Series? Well, your chance of winning it is about 1-8.
It's a new season.
They just happen to go to 8 straight.
Yeah.
So the playoffs,
So intense, though. I love playoff baseball. I mean, it definitely for
it's
teams
great, but man, when you're totally involved in a team and it's just gut-wrenching to see you go out and be the best team all year long and then just spit the bit in the playoffs.
Makes you feel ill.
Big time.
No doubt. David Youngkin saying good morning. Got Greg Smith in here. Aloha to you. Bookmeister, the Gregory was a weenie. Didn't want to play here anyways. I don't know about the didn't want to play here anyways, but the effort on tape was questionable, and you never know what somebody's dealing with. But
How much does he want to play, period?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on.
Effort and attitude have been following him around. We're not talking about someone's in the chat say, Randy Gregory has upside. He's 31, man. He's 31 years old with a career high of 6 sacks. You're getting what you get right there. And that's a good situational pass rusher. If you've got, again, he would be the guy that would get picked up if this was 10 years ago by the New England freaking Patriots, and he would go on a tear for 9 or 10 games, make $3 million, and then go sign a big contract and be a bust somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Benjamin Flores probably saying next stop New England for Randy. Who knows?
I did.
I pulled that up for you.
Different New England Patriots now, though. It's a different Patriots right now.
Yep. Arlie comes in, says good riddance. Not only Gregory not produced, his half-effort attitude was affecting the whole team. I mean, this is a statement from the Broncos, no doubt, and I'm curious if that is part of it.
You know what team I think of that a little bit like that right now, Nick? As far as the old Patriots was getting guys that could come in at a discount. You know who immediately comes to mind now as the replacement for them?
The Ravens?
Eagles.
Eagles? Oh, yeah.
I kind of think of the Eagles right now as, okay, of course, he's going to go to the Eagles to try and win a championship. That's who I think of right now. They haven't done it yet, but they're in that window where they've got that type of Q rating across the team with across the league with players.
I'd be shocked if he's not back in Dallas. He knows Dan Quinn. He loves Dan Quinn.
I'll be shocked if he's back in Dallas. He burned so many bridges. Now, Dan Quinn is the forgiving type.
I think
they were pissed.
They were pissed. I think he'll go back there with his tail between his legs, and they'll be happy to have him because he can be that, fifth fiddle on that defensive front, which is where Randy should be. He's a good player that if you already have a really good culture and talent, he can be a player that you're going to get. But once it kind of dipped, not getting it as much. Roy Osborne, morning, Nick and Scott. Is it started a fire sale in your opinion? I don't see a fire sale per se, because a fire sale to me means everything absolutely must go. You're trading whatever you can possibly get for Surtain. You're for sure trading Simmons. You're getting rid of Bowles. And I'm not sure that the Broncos are getting rid of every single possible player on this team they can. They're certainly looking to accumulate assets and kind of reset and create some opportunities for younger players. We saw that in the Adam Schefter tweet talking about Randy Gregory moving on now means that younger guys can step up and make some plays. The Broncos want to have some younger guys step up and make some plays. Cooper, Benito, Browning coming back here in the next 2-3 weeks. Just activated, but it's not going to play this week or the next week. I definitely not this week, but I don't believe it's truly a fire sale, but this is a first domino falling where there are going to be a few more.
Yeah, it depends on, it's a relative term, Roy. What do you think? If 3 or 4 guys go, would you consider that a fire sale? If yes, then that's a possibility. If you go, Essang Bassey's a small move. Then you go Randy Gregory, and if Jerry Jeudy comes up next, it has that feeling for some of us. I would say, yeah. So it's a relative phrase.
Yeah. Dylan, good morning to you, Dylan Von Arks. Good to see you. Jason McKeever over on Facebook says, what's the point of cutting Gregory? Because they had to cut someone for IR guys returning, low man on the depth chart, money and effort and sending a message. Moving on, we haven't even talked about it yet. Waiving Essang Bassey. He was a starter on the defense with everything, but, people don't really, undrafted free agent, not making a lot of money, not playing that great. You move on from Randy Gregory and then take on the cap ramifications of that too. That's saying this is unacceptable. What we've seen so far is not good enough. So I think that's more of a sending a move here, but it's also the immediacy of, or not the immediacy, but setting yourself up for next offseason, creating cap space because you're still, I think, in the red even after this move for next year. So you're getting a head start on creating space for next year.
Yeah, which was going to happen anyway. So, yes. Jason, in my opinion, Essang Bassey's a football move. We've got guys coming in that we think can do better. Whether it's Riley Moss, K'Wan Williams, if I want another defensive back, PJ Locke's getting healthy. Gregory was a culture move. We are better off if you're not here. Mm-hmm. Flat out. That's a your presence is hurting this team. Get out. Yeah. That was the point of cutting Randy Gregory.
And we'll see what happens with Browning. Thomas Incoom for a few weeks now is going to have a little bit more of a chance. Undrafted free agent. Broncos played pretty good money to bring in, so for undrafted wise at least. So we'll see how the pecking order shapes up. And edge is a question mark. It was a question mark entering the season, and the whole defensive front is still a question mark. Probably a position that's going to need a little bit of a makeover this offseason. Austin H. saying morning all. Good to see you. Tyler Brooks saying I didn't see Randy as a locker room guy. Didn't have a slob attitude of the field as well. Thug mentality. I don't know about any of that, Tyler, but I do know that there were some issues. Remember the fight after the Rams game last year after getting your butt kicked? There'd been a few issues here and there. So I think that this is definitely sending a message, and it's business as much as, making sure that other guys are getting an opportunity now. And what he was doing was not acceptable. I talked about it on here. It's not an anecdote. We saw it on the field. Making the same boneheaded play 3 plays in a row where it's a crackback block against River Craycraft and he's blocking him out. Unacceptable. Where's your awareness on that play? You got to know that's coming at some point. Same look, same formation. I'm honestly, what was the difference between the Miami game to the Bears game to finally move on from him? I guess they gave him a chance and then benched him because he was still poor.
I thought his effort was actually better
against the Bears.
Yeah, against the Bears. I kept an eye on him on that because I was pretty critical of him, and I want to give people a chance to so I can eat my words, or if I'm going to be critical, I want to then be able to praise him if I see corrections. Randy Gregory, there was a point I was going to make in there. I'll come back to it.
Okay. Well, Michaela's coming in saying, good morning, guys. Good to see you, Michaela. We got Wang Chung says, I need to adopt him now that I have a kid on the way. Hope you like pet fur. Golden retriever and a long-haired cat means a lot of pet fur. I'm going to put you to work with chores, cleaning up fur. Grover with the $9.99 super coming in saying, I wish we could have gotten something for Gregory. You still might. It's not officially a release yet, but probably not going to get anything. But not sad to see him go. It won't turn out our season around, but I'm interested to see what we do in the offseason. Denver Broncos for life, and let's go Phils. Yeah, Philly is definitely fun as well. I know Scott's not a fan of that, but as a Braves fan, but yeah, it's should be a good playoffs. I was pulling for the Mariners to make it. I'm pretty bummed they didn't get it. But
the problem I have with the Northeast teams being in the South is all those people move south. And we're just obnoxious as hell when they'd go to Braves games when I was a kid. It's like, if Philly is so great, if New York is so great, take your asses back to New York.
Mhm.
Like, oh, these teams really travel. They didn't travel. They moved here. All those people moved here. They live here, and they're obnoxious. Southern
Uh,
hospitality, man. Act like a guest in someone else's house. Have fun. But yeah, I'll never root for the Cubs again. I'll tell you that.
oh, Scott, I love you so much for that comment. I freaking I hate the Cubs so much.
The
I grew
first time they'd been in the playoffs in like 700 years, and they come down to the Braves and act like drunken. And I mean this affectionately with Alabama fans. I was trying to think who's like won a ton. So I'm not like knocking on Alabama fans. Drunken, obnoxious Alabama fans who have earned the right to be chest out.
yeah,
It was ridiculous.
I do not
Anyway,
like the Cubs.
one of the things about living in a transient city.
Yeah.
Lots of transplants in the South.
God,
Everybody moves from the North. Nobody moves north.
yeah. Cubs and Cornhuskers. I can't deal with it. Donald Wilson saying late again. Sorry, morning, Nick and Scott. Broncos country. Defensive coordinator next, and then we got Jeremy coming in. So Gregory and Bassey got the axe with guys getting healthy on defense. The excuses for Vance are running out. I mean, all of these moves to me from Sean Payton and the Broncos do point to they believe this is more of a players executing and talent issue than it is Vance Joseph. So I agree with Jeremy. Granted, you're not getting massive talent reinforcements. You're not going to, there's not all of a sudden going to be a Pro Bowl caliber defensive front player injected into this, which the defense is sorely lacking. But are they going to be the worst defense in the NFL, historically bad? If they still are, despite these moves, the arrow points to Vance Joseph.
Yeah. And again, we've said personnel. Yes, there are personnel problems with this team, including injuries and lack of depth. Yes, there is a Vance Joseph problem with this team. Which way you lean, farther or the other, depends on your own, personal opinion. I'm not gonna overall argue. The one where I have gotten into some arguments about it is this was a top 5 defense last year with the same players. They've gone in the tank. No, it wasn't. One, and two, it's not all the same players when you start accounting for all the injuries. So the revisionist history is where I have the problem. Not if you think Vance Joseph stinks. No problem. Not if you think there's not enough players on this team to field championship caliber defense. No problem. I think we all agree on that. It's just a matter of degrees. Where we disagree sometimes is with our perception of the past.
I think people gloss over the fact of how poor the defense was week 9 and on last year because what an absolute circus fire the offense was. But if the Broncos had a competent offense last year but was losing games and missed the playoffs, we'd have a different perception on the defense. That first impression.
Take out that one game, Nick, you were still 23rd in scoring defense in your last 8 games.
Yeah.
If you take out the Rams game, you were still bottom 3rd last year. Well, that's because they were on the field. Thanks for pulling out sample sizes. We're talking half the season, man.
Yeah.
They weren't a top 5 defense last
Not
year.
even
And when
close.
they were going against Jimmy Garoppolo and the San Francisco 49ers, who also only put up 14 points in Atlanta against nobody's going to call that a great defense.
Yeah.
They were going against a first start for Geno Smith post-Russ on a Monday night. They were going against – who else did they have? Did they have the Jets in there? I know they had the hapless Indianapolis Colts. Good God, that was one of the worst football games I ever saw.
Sickos, baby. Felt like some action out there. It was a little Toledo versus Kent State.
that was awful. But I remember the point I was going to make about Randy Gregory and why you want to make that cut is because when you're in a room full of a bunch of young edge guys like you are, what's the oldest one in there right now is Cooper at 3rd year, and your veteran is making about 10 times as much money as they are, and he's not putting forth the effort, that's a crap example. I don't want him around my young players. Plain and simple. I don't want them to look around and think, man, the guy's making 10 times what I do, and he ain't doing crap. This season's going in the tank. To hell with this. I'm going to take care of myself. To their credit, they haven't done that. They're out there busting ass and taking advantage of the opportunity that's been handed to them through some of the injuries and lackluster play from some of the other players.
Yeah, without a doubt. Kyle Wielden coming in saying, great show, guys. Accountability fund. Yeah, he's playing well. And Kevin comes in and say, how do you think Kush is doing so far? And Joseph says, haven't heard much from Kush. Guess that means he's playing good. I think he's playing okay. Your ability to run screens is negligible with him out there, even though they're trying because he can't really get out into space. But he's done a much better job this season in my opinion, at least, not getting crushed in the pocket almost immediately, which is, I mean, that's the bare minimum, and he's been doing that. So I think he's been a average player, and on a rookie contract, you can't ask for much more from him. I am curious what happens with him. This is last year of his contract. I'm guessing the Broncos probably move on from him after this year, and he'll find a spot somewhere else. Maybe a 1 year, 2 year kind of contract. But I think he's fine. He's not a plus, but he hasn't been a negative this year. And considering what he was last season, that's a step forward.
I would try and re-sign him for a slight raise over what he's making now, which is for his contract, which is reserve money at a couple different positions. He hasn't been the complete and awful liability that he's been in the past years, but he's still not what you need at that position. There's too many deficiencies in his game, especially with his mobility getting out there. And while he's holding up better, he's still not holding up great. He's been 20 to 25 center instead of 30 to 32 center. And you need better than that. And it doesn't cost much in terms of premium capital, draft picks, and or free agency money to try and get an upgrade there.
Yeah. So he's been playing better, and credit
he
to
has.
him.
He's definitely playing better, no doubt.
Yep. So good for him, and we'll see what that means for the rest of the season, and hopefully he can stay healthy. Because by all accounts, Lloyd is a good dude, hardworking, smart kid, and not cheering against him, and he's playing better this year. So really, really happy about that. I am curious. I mean, I thought this would be much more of a run-centric team this year, and so far they're passing much more than I thought they'd run. I guess credit to Russell Wilson, looks a lot better too, so why not pass the ball around a bit? But I would be curious what he'd look like in a little more downhill, ISO A-gap-centric run game, which I thought is what we were going to get, because I don't know if Kush has the ability to get that push, but still playing a lot better. Brooke L. and Official Music coming in saying, "Good morning, y'all," with the smiling sun. We appreciate you, Brooke. Hope you're doing well. We also got Joya LaGuardia coming in saying Jets defense is legit. The young quarterback is playing very well. I don't know about, he had a against the Chiefs. We'll see what it looks like in Denver. He looked really terrible last season, and maybe it clicks for him. I mean, he's got a talented arm, and he tries some things. I do appreciate that he wants to hunt, but he makes a lot of mistakes and sometimes looks a little bit like a deer in the headlights. So we'll see on Zach Wilson. As far as the Jets defense being legit, they certainly are. They kind of feel like the Broncos back when the post Peyton Manning era, where the defense is amazing, but everything comes back to quarterback, and there's like weird tension between the defense and the offense as well happening in the locker room. But I mean, Quinnen Williams is out there. You got Jermaine Johnson. You got Will McDonald. You got Sauce Gardner. You got C.J. Mosley. I mean, the list, Franklin Myers. The list goes on and on. This is a really, really talented Jets defense, probably one of the top 5 most talented defenses, maybe the best defense the Broncos will go against this year on paper.
Yeah, and Joey, the young quarterback is playing very well. The young quarterback had a good game. As far as, and what have you done for me lately? His most recent game was his best one. If he continues on that trend, then yes. However, before that game, his 3 games prior to that were pretty bad. 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He had 157 yards on 50% completions, 44% completions at Dallas. He's 3 out of 4 games have been pretty awful.
Mm-hmm.
The last one was good. And as we said, we'll find out just how good a quarterback coach Nathaniel Hackett is, because if he has Zach Wilson playing on the level that he played last week, if he can continue anywhere near that over the course of the season, that's a hell of a coaching job.
Yeah. And saying me pulling for the Rays, well, they're already out. It shows how much I've been watching the playoff baseball with my cards out. I would be following if the M's are out, but I was out backpacking. I don't know what's going on.
We got Kyle, didn't we?
We did get Kyle. There was a $5 one that I'm working my way down that we'll get to here soon, but did want to say hello to some more folks first. Gatorade Gaming saying, "Good morning, Nick and Scott. What's good, Broncos country?" Coming in late. Well, better late than ever. Never. Nathan Popel coming in saying, "Good morning, guys. What do you expect? Should we expect a blockbuster trade from Denver next year?" A blockbuster trade for Denver next year. If there is a blockbuster trade from Denver next year, I would assume it's in the draft, and it is probably going up, unless it's actually trading Russell Wilson. I didn't think of that one. So it's possible. I would not expect it per se, but they're a trade of Russell Wilson, even though the cap ramifications are big, you probably have something happen in the background with the contract to make that possible. Or let's say you're picking at 5 and the Bears are at 2 and you love Drake May. Maybe you make that move up for Drake May. I think those are the two that I'd be looking out for right now.
It would have to be draft, and blockbuster to me would mean multiple first round picks when we're talking draft. So it would cost you 3 first rounders to move up to 2, and you only have one player on the team right now that would generate blockbuster headlines as far as what you would get in return, and that's Pat Surtain. And no, I don't expect that to happen. So no, I don't expect a blockbuster trade next year.
Yeah,
I expect them to settle down and start building, as opposed to we're gonna make this big splash move with Russell Wilson. Didn't necessarily work. We're gonna give it one more shot. We're gonna spend a bunch of money in free agency. We're gonna trade up in the draft. We're gonna go for it. Hasn't necessarily worked. I think next year we'll see how the season plays out, but next year feels like we're gonna settle down and we're gonna build this thing the right way.
Yeah, we'll be. I do think if they're picking 4 or 5, there's a chance that they maybe go up for a quarterback in that situation.
Yeah, depending on who's sitting in that 1 and 2 spot, there's going to be a lot of, if it's would Carolina, if Carolina, they don't have their pick.
Nope, Bears have both of them. So that's
the Bears have both of them. I'm like, would Carolina do that? No. Like, who are some of the other bad teams out there? Minnesota would absolutely go for a quarterback.
They're one of the ones that are trade up.
Yeah, Arizona Raiders would absolutely go for a quarterback. The Bears will absolutely go for a quarterback.
You said Arizona already?
Yeah, I did.
They're one, of course.
I'm just trying to think who could be really bad, because right now I'm taking Houston off the board. Houston's not going to be in that top 5 range or top 2 range. Houston's not going to be drafting top 2.
Nope. I mean, teams that might trade out of that. So since Chicago has 1 and 2 right now, if they did have 2, the question is Marvin Harrison Jr. versus whatever trade package could give them for number 2. It's how much do they like Marvin Harrison.
You're taking the 3 picks. I don't care how good Marvin Harrison you think he's going to be. You're taking 3 first rounders.
I agree with you to an extent. The one that you're getting back one of them needs to be a top pick still. It's not like you're trading back to pick 32 and 3 first round picks with the Bills. It needs to be
if you're in the top 10, I'm talking about teams that are already bad, that really desperately need a quarterback, are usually pretty bad.
Yes. Exactly. So it's not just 3, but one of them is a top pick this year in this draft
10.
as well.
I'm moving back from 2 to 9, and I'm getting 2 more first rounders. That's what it's going to cost to come out of that 2 spot.
I mean, with how the draft is set up right now, it's Chicago.
I still agree with you, Nick. It's still not guaranteed, but I would absolutely do that.
I agree with you, because there's no such thing as a guarantee in the draft, and you're just adding those resources.
Yeah, if I get 3 first rounders, my chance of getting a superstar increases by about double, as opposed to taking one guy in the top 5.
Yep. So we'll see. I mean, maybe you could see that thing where right now we have a long way to go, so this won't be the order. But let's say it was the order. You have Chicago via Carolina, and then Vegas. Maybe Vegas trades up from 2 to 3, giving up their first round pick next year. Bears still get Marvin Harrison Jr. because he'll go 3 overall. Then they get an extra pick, and the Raiders guarantee getting Drake May in that scenario. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. And there's a lot of teams that are terrible that might go up there. Vikings right now looking at a quarterback. New England's up there probably looking at a quarterback. Arizona's up there looking at a quarterback. New York Giants probably looking at a quarterback picking up there. The one who's interesting that's terrible, and I don't expect them to continue to be so bad, but the Bengals sitting there at 1 and 3. If they completely flub the season, Joe Burrow's injured. Let's say they shut him down and they just are horrible this year. Maybe that's one where there's a scenario where you could see a trade back, but we'll see. Long way to go. Probably not.
The Bengals aren't drafting top 2.
No, probably not. But I mean, if they move on, if they bench Burrow for the year, you still don't think so? I mean,
I don't think so. I still don't think so. I think their roster is good enough that they're not so quarterback dependent that they go from Super Bowl contender to 1 and 16.
Yeah. Crazy things happen, but yeah, I agree.
Arlie's getting crazy with us. Appreciate the stars, my friend. He says, great show, gentlemen. Always love the insight and discussion. Broncos chat gives me a piece of home here in Florida. We love doing the morning shows for those of y'all that can make it in early with us, no matter where you are. As the phrase around here says, Broncos country is not a geographic location. It is a state of being. Grover says, don't want to make this a baseball chat, but even though I'm a Phils fan, I agree about the fans. The Eagles fans are still the worst. Eagles fans are rough. But they're rough on their own team, for God's sakes.
I love that. I'm about
They're
that.
tough on their own. And Grover, I grew up in the 80s, man. I'm trying to be a sports fan of my home team. The Braves were god awful. The Falcons had one winning season in the 80s, and it was 1980. I was 7. I didn't see a winning season from either one of those teams until about 1991, and that was both of them. Then I think the Falcons may have finally made the playoffs, and that was the run of like 14 straight division championships, the worst the first year for the Braves. But it was tough. You'd go to a game, there'd be 3,000 Braves fans and 10,000 transplants from the other cities raising hell. And the Phillies and Mets were both really good in the 80s.
Yeah.
Luckily for us, Phils and Braves fans, we can agree on this together. The Mets haven't been
Mets.
worth a damn since.
They had that good run when the Cardinals knocked them out when they had, Beltran.
Mets are going to Met, man. They're a disaster. How do you spend 50% more than the next closest and still finish last? I mean, you talk about just burning money, criminally negligent with money. New York Mets. They're still paying Bobby Bonilla.
Gotta love it. Have you seen the we're at the end of the show here pretty soon. Have you seen all the content surrounding Mrs. Met or Miss Met? Okay. We'll leave it at that. Danny Love come and say we definitely don't need him, but Randy wasn't the player we paid for. Nick and Coop are holding it down. Plus, we have a few injured players on D. I really like Nick Benito, Baron Browning, and Cooper as well. I feel like all of those guys would be much better being one spot down in the pecking order. So if you had, a Von Miller-esque player, every team could use that, but every single one feels like they should be a slot further down than they will be on this defense. Maybe the Broncos end up going with an edge in the draft this year. I think there's only one potential blue chip defensive player in this class, and that's Dallas Turner out of Alabama.
You're not high on Jared Verse?
I like him. I don't think he's got incredible burst, and I don't think he's got that finishing twitch ability. I think he's a little stiff. So I think he's a Bradley Chubb-esque caliber player coming out where he's very good. Mm-hmm. He'd be a number 1 on a team, but I don't think he's a true perennial all-pro conversation talent. I think
that's a good 25 back into the first type of guy.
I think he's not your no doubt blue chip first round kind of guy. I think he'll have a first round grade, maybe even like a mid first round grade. But because of where the draft class kind of falls off, I expect him to go from 8 to 14, which is the type of player I think he is. He's very good. And you also have so I think Dallas Turner is number 1. He's the only one that I think has a chance to be a top 5 pick out of the defensive players in this class. Then there are 3 other edge rushers that I'm not ready to sort yet. You got Latu out of UCLA, who is big and really impressive, but has some medical questions. You have Jared Verse, who is really strong with his hands, powerful player, not the bendiest, not the best twitch. I don't know if it's kind of like that Jadeveon Clowney thing where it's he can't get that last angle to finish a play, but he's disruptive. Obviously not the freak height, weight, speed Clowney, but that's that kind of player that I think where it's he has all these pressures. Why is he not finishing? Doesn't have that bend to finish it there. And then also somebody who is bendy and super twitchy and whatnot, but a little small, little light is Chop Robinson from Penn State. So I'm not sure how I'm going to sort any of those guys, but Dallas Turner he's in my top 6 right now for this class. And he's the only one that I would be comfortable with taking a top 6 pick on for the defensive players.
Elliot D comes in. He says, if we win the coin toss, take the ball and get our offense on the field. We defer and the other team scores and sets the tone of the game. Thanks, gents. Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Took a 7-0 lead on the Bears. Mm-hmm. Right? And then it was 28-0 after that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, Elliot, if your defense is playing the way it did for 6 quarters, it doesn't really matter who gets the ball first. And I think the Bears did have the ball first, and they had to punt, and then they went. I'm sure they did. Mm-hmm. And then the Broncos went down and scored because they've scored on their first possession 3 out of 4 times, which to your point still says, hey, give me the ball. I'll take the ball, and maybe I can get an extra possession at the end of the half.
Yep.
People talk about that all the time. And I'm doing the math on it, Nick. If I end the possession, if I take the ball first and I end with the ball, I got an extra possession in the first half. Mm-hmm. I got it first. I got it last. I got an extra one. So this deferring to steal an extra possession where you double up at the end, you're really only coming out even. The extra possession, because let's say you defer, you want the ball in the second half, you end the ball with the first half. That means we each had 5. I had 5, you had 5, you ended at the end. And then at the end of the game, in the second half, you start with 1, and then depending on how that plays off, we could be even or you could get an extra 1. There's no guarantee on that, but we could end up even depending on who has the ball last. If I want to get an extra possession, absolutely for sure, it's if I start with the ball and end with the ball in the first half.
There's probably some sort of statistical analysis out there because I haven't looked at the data on this or anything,
Right.
so I don't really have a strong opinion. I do think that because of how good the Broncos have been on the scripted plays, that maybe it makes more sense for them to be aggressive and go get it first to kind of kick things off and dictate the rest of the game. But if maybe there is something also about guaranteeing that start in the second half and knowing, having a better idea of where the game is at and going.
Oh, yeah, and I think the momentum swing that's available to you with back-to-back possessions is mentally, it's
Yeah.
huge. It is
Yeah.
huge. But as far as pure mathematics, I get an extra possession if I take the ball first.
Yeah. Especially if you score. The Broncos have been. Rob Bucksbaum coming in here. I guess you borrowed the tinfoil hat from me on this one, Rob, because I tweeted this out yesterday to an extent. Said, good morning, Nick and Deacon Scott. Tinfoil hat this week, potentially a showcase week for Judy to the Panthers, similar to the Albert Okwuegbunam preseason game 3 versus the Rams. I tweeted something almost exactly the same. And people are like, oh, man, we'll have Sauce Gardner on him then. Well, Sauce has played. How many snaps do you think Sauce has played in the slot this year, Scott?
I think I know this, and someone said 0. I think you said
0.
0. Just listening
0
to you
snaps.
on building the Broncos, but I wouldn't have known that.
Yep, 0 snaps in the slot, and Judy's played, I think 68 to 70% of his snaps in the slot this year. So it's mostly going to be Michael Carter II. I think Michael Carter is going to be the main guy matched up on the slot versus Judy in that situation. So I do think it's possible that this is a Jerry Judy showcase game for the Broncos to potentially trade him. I don't know about him to the Panthers. I think the Cowboys are also in the mix there. I think that maybe the Patriots would be in the mix, but we'll see. Jimmy Smith says, what do you think about trading Judy to the Panthers for Judy and a fourth for Brian Burns? It's going to cost more than that to get Brian Burns in here. He is a top 10, top 12 edge rusher in football. Panthers turned down 2 first-round picks for him a couple years ago. You're probably talking about Judy and a 2 and a 3 for Brian Burns, and that doesn't make a lot of sense for the Broncos for where they're at. I'm definitely offering Judy and a fourth for Brian Burns, but you're probably getting a dial tone relatively quickly on that one. Any thoughts on that, Scott?
Yeah, Brian Burns was out there as a possible, most tradable players that Bleacher Report did. And frankly, the top 2 guys on that list, the first 2 guys on the list, they were actually last because they counted in reverse order.
Yeah.
Were Kareem Jackson and Garrett Bowles. Who's trading for Kareem Jackson? Nobody, man. He's been a free agent 2 years in a row who has tested the market and come back to Denver.
Yep. Yeah, that's not happening. We got Alan Forrester coming in here. Alan, the way this picture looks like you got a halo going on there. So God bless you. Good morning, guys. Loving the show. Go Broncos. I saw a comment in here saying that we should be talking about playoff scenarios, not the draft. We'll see if the Broncos win the next 2 games, then we'll move on to that. But right now the Broncos have the 4th overall pick in the draft, and Scott and I are both draft heads. I mean, that's honestly kind of why we got put together by Chad, is because we're both a little bit draft and team building obsessed, and we love the process and philosophy of it. So you're always going to get a little bit of draft content from that. But if you want playoff scenario,
gets out of bed before noon.
What was that? Sorry,
I said, and Nick's the only one that gets out of bed before noon.
I'm up early, but that's okay. Sunrise hikes are the best. Michael Ronquillo says, great show today, Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos and buck 'em. We appreciate you. And Michael coming in and saying 30 straight weeks sending Facebook stars. That's incredible, Michael. We appreciate you so much. A huge benefactor to the show. What do you even say? Thank you. Thank you. Final topic here before we get on out. Jets this week. We talked a little bit about the Jets. Great defense, Zach Wilson, run game. I do think that the Broncos end up losing this game a very close football game. I think that the defense in the end, it's really the run defense for me. I mean, without Gregory out there, without Essang Bassey, maybe you see it be a little bit better, but I don't know. I just don't see the Broncos having the ability to take away one phase of the football game well enough to win this game. Breece Hall looks really, really good, and I think the Broncos end up losing this game something like 28-27.
Oh, are you a believer in karma? It just feels like there's some karmic kickback with some of the chest thumping over the summertime where you come in and I do this better, I do this right, and all of a sudden it blows up. And I just have that feeling right now where you come in. The Jets are a very beatable football team. They've got a defense that's going to come in and give them a chance. They're very similar to the early stage Broncos last year. Zach Wilson will give you the opportunity to take away the ball. It's going to come down to, like I said, to me, the most important guy that can come back this week is Justin Simmons to go out there and try and read Zach Wilson, give him a chance, make them beat you with the running game, and let them, drop back off. Give him a chance to throw the ball around. And if he ends up coming out hot, then adjustments. I know, crazy. But from what we've seen, he doesn't read a defense very well. Rush with 4. If you can get to him with four, great. Otherwise, I have 7 in coverage. He gets panicky and throws the ball into traffic.
Yeah.
But I just have a bad feeling about this one, y'all. For Broncos country, I kind of like the Jets in this one too.
Yeah. Achy Dragon always has some interesting comments. Says the Randy Gregory era was prosaic, I believe is how you pronounce that word. Hopefully that's not a dirty word. My vocab is not strong enough for the word prosaic this morning. I left my main coffee mug at work, Scott, so I'm a little bummed. But what can you do? Danny Love Jr. says, first time on the show. Pretty good show, fellas. I'll be back. That's what we love to hear. Thank you, Danny Love, for sending the love. Hope you're doing well. Orange Pucky says, hey, Scott, stop that. Talking about the karma here. We'll see what happens. This is very much a toss-up game. I do think that the Broncos will lose a close one, but maybe this is where they start to get it on track. I mean, who knows? I would stay away from this one from a betting perspective. And this would be a nice little appetizer for Sunday night with Dallas versus 49ers. I mean, that'll be a lot of fun game. I mean, it's kind of funny to talk. We were in the past like, oh man, Aaron Rodgers, Nathaniel Hackett, Sean Payton, maybe this Broncos Jets game will be flexed. Wet fart noise. Like, God, no way. Never was going to happen.
Cowboy, all I had to do was look at the schedule and say, oh, it's the Cowboys on primetime. The Cowboys don't get flexed. They're still the number one draw in NFL, and it doesn't matter how they're doing or whatnot. They're the most watched team in the NFL. They're not getting flexed, especially in a premium. If this was Cowboys, Texans, I don't know. Cowboys, who's someone else's? Falcons. If it was somebody that didn't really matter, Cowboys, Falcons, it still wouldn't have gotten flexed. It's the Cowboys.
You know what might have gotten it flexed? The Kansas City Taylor Swifts. If they were playing that you talk about the most watched team in football. I've seen the videos of like the young, 5 or 6 year old girls watching Sunday Night Football, and they showed Taylor Swift on the screen. They just freaking go nuts. Like it's really wild. I don't understand.
She's done. I really couldn't.
She wrote a song called Love Story. That's one. I don't know.
I'm just pop of any kind, popular music of any kind. It's just not there.
Yeah. We'll see. And Albert getting out here. Stop with the losing talk. We're gonna win and win big. Well, hopefully
glad you're feeling good, man. Glad you're feeling good.
Yeah, I think betting is legal in Colorado, so you can put your money where your mouth is if you feel like they're gonna win big. That probably sounds like covering the spread. So I'm staying away from this one if I was a bettor this week. But who knows? Broncos make some moves. Accountability now shifts from the players to Vance Joseph more so. I mean, guys that weren't executing. This to me says that, okay, Vance, this isn't all on you in the scheme. These are guys not getting it done. We moved on from 2 of them. And God, Scott, we didn't even talk about this. Injuries. Who's expected back this week? Baron Browning's still going to be out. Quan Williams not out yet. Baron Browning was activated. He's got his 21-week practice window.
He's eligible for practice. He hasn't been activated. Yes. There's a difference. I've seen a lot of misinformation on this in the chat. Well, these guys are back. They're not back.
Yeah.
They'll be back when you see there's a corresponding. When you read the headline, Baron Browning added to the 53-man active roster, then it's one. This is step 1. Step 2 is a 53-man roster. Step 3, and the most important step, is seeing them on the field. But you're in step 1 of a 3-step process right now.
Yep. So we'll see what happens. We have, from the injury report, Javonte Williams might not play this week. He did not participate. Baron Browning was limited. Frank Clark limited. Lloyd Cushenberry limited. Jewell limited. Purcell limited. And Justin Simmons limited. And PJ Locke full. So maybe we'll see Locke is eligible to be activated this week. We'll see.
And also practice. because a lot of times Wednesdays and Thursdays, or Wednesdays or Thursdays, one of those is a walkthrough. So it's like,
Yep.
oh, he was full, and then you read and it's like, yeah, we did a walkthrough today. Wow, he did his walkthrough.
Yeah. That's yeah, that's definitely possible. And Mike coming in. Oops, sorry, Scott. There you go.
No, Mike says, love the show. I think Scott is sore from the Broncos beating the Falcons at the Super Bowl. Just kidding. No, my anger with that one lies 100% with Eugene Robinson. It's that one was self-inflicted. I was 25 years old, and at the time I said, as a Falcons fan who's my age, when I was at the time was 25, I'm like, basically your only goal is to just not be embarrassed to say you're an Atlanta Falcons fan. They went 364 days that year. Thanks, Eugene. Appreciate you. No, no ill will towards the Broncos. They were all business being there. Falcons treated that like a South Beach. I'm mad that we didn't get the epic game that we deserved. That Falcons team was good. It was really good, and they were beaten before the first kickoff. I'm not saying they would have beaten Denver by any stretch of the imagination, but it would have been – that was a 14-2 team with a top-5 offense, a top-5 defense, and had just beaten a 15-1 Minnesota Viking team at home, and then they checked out.
Yeah.
That's what I was mad about. I was mad that it didn't have anything to do with the Broncos.
Yeah. No, I mean, long time ago also. So
I'm much more hurt over
28-3.
That one stung more, and I'll hold 1995 6-0 Jim Leyritz home run New York Yankees, 1996 World Series much more. That one hurt more because meh. But at this point, I think K-Hop asks, which do you worry, which was searching more Broncos loss or Falcons loss? Neither really that much. I'm pretty even keel with all of it right now with sports. I've been in the sports media business for over 20 years. My fandom is Chelsea Football Club. That's where I have directed my fandom, because the rest of it's work, it's professional. And you've heard me say the old saying a zillion times. After you work in sports media, you start rooting for names on the back of the jersey. You start rooting for the people much more than the teams themselves. And I don't go too high and low with the NFL. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how it plays out. And Carrico Moore saying, how do you think Russ has played the first quarter of the season? He's played like a top 10 quarterback. I think the scheme has helped a heck of a lot, but he's playing a lot better. I do wish that he would be a little bit better in the down-to-down, drive-to-drive, because there's way too much, either great touchdown drive or 3-and-outs kind of thing going on where, you'd hope a few plays they'd get a little bit more consistency. You'd see Russell Wilson use his legs to just, hold on to the ball a little bit longer. But he's playing really, really good football. The question now becomes with Wilson is that he's going to be 35 years old this year. He's going to be 36 next year. I think he turns 35 in November this year. Are you going to be able to rebuild the defense and team around him in a window that makes sense with his age? I don't know. That's a hard one, but he's playing really well, and he is a plus asset for this team, and really happy to see it, because he looked so bad last year. It's hard to imagine him playing like he's playing like right now.
Yeah, I thought he's looked great, and at the very least, I think he's played his way into becoming a tradable asset for the Denver Broncos.
Certainly possible.
You'd have to eat a bunch of dead cap, but you should be able to get, if you decide that that's what you need to do. The other part of it is he's played well enough where you can go one more year with him as your quarterback without tanking this team, where you're running this guy out and the whole team says, you're playing with that guy, I'm done, I'm out. He's playing well enough that you could eat another year of his contract. If you can get through 2024, then you've got better options with his contract trying to rebuild this team while he's still playing at a pretty good level of quarterback. So again, his playing better is all good for the Denver Broncos. And he's playing great. I thought he looked fantastic against the Bears.
Yeah, he looked really, really good. And we'll see what it looks against a much better defense with the Jets, and the schedule getting a little tougher. But it's unbelievable. It's the, what is it? Hydra, where you cut off one head and two more come out. It feels like that with the Broncos. Yep. It's terrible. But appreciate everybody coming in.
Hail Hydra.
Yeah, they do that one. Yep.
Yeah.
That's You Marvel nerd. But appreciate, I'm going to start talking Pokemon now. Appreciate everyone coming in here, following us today. Make sure you're following Scott on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendall, MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle, as well as at BTB Football Pod. No, wait. BFB. I would, because
don't worry about it. If you can't get it, skip it.
It is BFB _ pod on Twitter. BFB, the Broncos for breakfast. So appreciate that. Make sure you also follow us at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. And as the ticker says here underneath, subscribe, like, and share over on YouTube. Shout out to our YouTube subscribers and shout out to everybody who came in and contributed today. Heck of a lot of people. Michael Ronquillo multiple times, Troy Bauer, Gary Palmer, Grover came in, Kyle Wielden with the $20. Appreciate you. Arlie Tucker coming in here as well, Elliot D, and Mike Edel. So appreciate everybody. Appreciate all the comments. Scott and I will see you guys live again tomorrow morning on his channel and general NFL. Maybe we'll get into a little bit more draft stuff. Maybe it'll be Cowboys, 49ers. That'll be a fun game. Who knows? It's always a good time. You guys kind of lead the chat there. So we appreciate that. Any final thoughts, Scott?
No, I think I beat Colin to it. I'm not sure on that one. And then who was making fun of the way I said Gatorade Gaming? I wouldn't have any idea what this even meant if I didn't watch the Detroit Lions running back last year get upset when someone said Pokemon. I'm like, what? Yeah, Pokemon. Pokemon. That's about as far as I go with Pokemon. That's about as much as I know that it's not Pokemon. And Taylor Swift.
Good for you. Yep.
Sorry, don't know, don't care. Got enough going on.
Absolutely. And it is Benjamin, by the way. Good to see you, Benjamin. Appreciate everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Have a good Thursday. Continue to choose kindness, compassion, and as always, go Broncos.